Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined for the first time this offseason by Andrew Erickson and a great guest. Erickson, I will start with you. We've had a pretty awesome weekend of wildcard games, one of them excluded that we're not going to be talking about primarily. Do you have any major takeaways so far from what we've seen the last couple of days?
I mean, don't reach out for the goal line if it's not fourth down. I mean, that's as simple as that. If it's not fourth down, you can't do that because you can risk fumbling the ball and in return for a touchdown by the other team. Come on, Ryan. This is 101 football.
I so specifically just said we would not be talking about one of the games in particular, and you led with the worst moment of that game.
It was top of mind. The only other thing to take.
I didn't realize that I'm wearing orange, actually, which was probably dumb in my day of mourning 12 hours after an orange team eliminated the Ravens. It happens. They were supposed to lose going in. They were playing with house money with a backup quarterback, but doesn't make it hurt any less. Our guest today, Bradley Stalder, fantasy data analyst. Bradley, thank you so much for coming on. And do you have any takeaways from the weekend that we've seen?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Ryan. Good to see you again, Andrew. And Trevor Lawrence is who we hoped he would be, coming back from 4 interception first half to 4 total touchdowns in the second half. That was a beautiful comeback victory. One of my favorite games. I know some people shut it off at halftime. That was a shame. Y'all know that the game script is a lot better than that. So, Trevor Lawrence, I'm excited for that Chiefs-Jaguars game later on. But, it's going to be a lot of fun seeing Mahomes and Lawrence go at it.
Oh, definitely, for sure. And just yet another young quarterback in that conference. The AFC is looking like sort of the NBA Western Conference has for many years, just, the clear big brother of the two conferences. Bradley's Twitter handle is @FFStalder. That's STALDER. Andrew Erickson is @AndrewErickson_. We know him. Today's show, we're going to talk about some running back takeaways from 2022. We're also going to look ahead and give you some predictions for the 2023 running back landscape. We're going to jump right into it. And Erickson, I'll start with you. Give me your first takeaway here from the running back landscape in 2022.
So this is something I kind of found out kind of going into last year as well. Basically looking at targeting impending free agent running backs. We start to see a lot of these running backs, their teams feed them because they know, hey, we may not sign you to another contract, so we're going to just run you into the ground. And if you just look at some of the guys that are going to be free agents this, in 2023, it's Josh Jacobs, Saqoun Barkley, Tony Pollard, Miles Sanders, Jamaal Williams. Like, there's a list of 5 running backs that all exceeded their ADP and smashed in basically all capacities. And what's a common theme among them is they were all free agents. Now, this doesn't work in every single situation, just like there is no golden rule about drafting every single player. But I think that pinpointing some of these players as, hey, like, he's a free agent, I think that we should try to value them a little bit higher. And, as we'll get into, like, Saqoun Barkley was one of my hits this year. Like, one of the reasons I was targeting was because I knew he was a free agent running back, and the Giants had all the incentive in the world to just ride him into the ground. And similarly with Josh Jacobs, that's also how it kind of worked out. But the market wasn't really as high on Josh Jacobs, as I was not as well. But when you look back and see, he was a free agent. Like, they had all the reason to just run him to the ground. That's what we kind of saw play out. So it worked last year, and it's going to be something I want to continue doing into the next season.
Are there any impending free agent running backs that stand out to you right now? I know we obviously have a long way to go till draft season, but any that early are kind of you're interested in?
I had a list pulled up. I believe that some of the guys that popped out to me. So Jonathan Taylor is on that list. DeAndre Swift is on that list. Antonio Gibson is on that list. So a lot of guys that I think people were hopeful of, that have flashed, that have proven track records, which is a lot of things that Josh Jacobs kind of checks the boxes off of. Those types of players are going to be players that, talented running back, maybe not a great situation right now. They could get traded, because they are a free agent. So I think that those are types of running backs I want to take, especially if they're discounted by the market.
Bradley, what's your first takeaway here?
Yeah, I want to avoid veteran running backs whose team just added a day 1 or day 2 rookie. We look at those running back situations from this past year. Michael Carter with Breece Hall, Rashad Penny with Kenneth Walker, Devin Singletary with James Cook, Leonard Fournette, Rashad White, Elijah Mitchell with Tyrion Davis-Price, Antonio Gibson, and J.D. McKissic with Bijan Robinson. Essentially, all of these either did not return on value of ADP or were extremely limited. The only player of that list of veteran returning players that returned on points per game value was Rashad Penny. He finished as running back 28 in fantasy points per game, but got injured very early in the season. And we saw Kenneth Walker, ascend into that high-end running back 2, low-end running back 1 tier. But ultimately, there was no way in which those types of running backs won for you. Leonard Fournette was massive disappointment, despite the fact that, he was involved a lot and Tom Brady gave him a lot of volume. It was just there's no ceiling to be accessed with those types of running backs. And so the floor is just scary. And so they're avoid situations for me. And that's what I'm going to be monitoring as we get into draft season. How are teams approaching and treating these veteran running backs? Are they going to be replaced in the future or not?
We know that Bijan Robinson is like a generational prospect, and we're going to be talking about him later in the show. Beyond him, is this running back class strong enough that you think a lot of these rookies are going to come in and take jobs from veterans early on?
I think every year you're going to have a flurry of, a handful of those running backs who will fall into day 2. And even for instance, this past year, there were some people who were saying Brian Robinson going to be a day 3 pick. And really he fell into day 2. And that's what got him into that volume, that there are going to be teams who fall in love with some of these volume type of older running back prospects, and especially given that COVID has affected running backs over the last couple of years and their declaring status, and especially the rookies. So I think there are going to be running backs in that situation. So we're going to be monitoring the rookie situation very closely come draft season.
Before we move on, I just want to take a quick second to talk about the prop bet cheat sheet. If you love sports betting or just want to have a little extra stake in the playoff games this postseason, check out our prop bet cheat sheet at bettingpros.com/props. It gives you the best prop bets based on our projections, the prop bet odds from different sports books, so you can be sure you're getting the best possible value available on the market. Everybody that I know that uses it loves it. I do too. So make sure to check it out at bettingpros.com/props to have some more fun and win some more money this postseason. Erickson, let's go to you for your next takeaway.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking at identifying running backs with the potential to possess goal line, red zone roles in high scoring offenses. Now, because I think it's a really easy way to just cash in on, hey, this is a goal line back on a good offense. He's going to score a lot of fantasy points. Now, I don't think it's the main driver. So it's don't draft a guy in the second round that has a red zone role, kind of like with Ezekiel Elliott, which I think was the main case for him. And it did kind of work out for Zeke because he did just go on an absolute touchdown tear, but you could have just waited till round 12 and just drafted Jamaal Williams. Jamaal Williams led the NFL in touchdowns, and he was on a good offense that we all kind of liked. And it was just the DeAndre Swift hype that really kept Jamaal Williams down. He wasn't that great last year when DeAndre Swift missed some time, or in 2021, Jamaal Williams wasn't really that great, but there was not really many. It was really wish casting that, Swift's going to take over the goal line role. And, I did that partially. I thought that it would be like an Austin Eckler type. He's going to get the goal line role. He's got the pass catching. He's going to blow up. That was not the case. Jamaal Williams just retained his goal line role from the year prior, and it was a better offense, a good offensive line. And it's not really surprising that Jamaal Williams scored so many. Now, the amount of touchdowns he did score obviously was surprising, but the fact that he was, a big benefactor to fantasy teams because of his red zone role and how many touchdowns he did score, I don't think was super, super surprising. So finding guys that have the potential to be red zone backs, I think is something that we would need to really pinpoint. It's a really easy way to hit on a fantasy running back.
Did we like the Lions offense that much? I know we liked a lot of the skill pieces, obviously, but I think Jared Goff played better than at least certainly I expected. Or you look at the other way, a team like the Bucs, I think, was a lot worse on offense than we expected. How confident are you in predicting? Obviously, the teams like the Chiefs and the Bills we know are going to be good, but how confident are you in predicting who will have these roles, and more importantly, which offenses will be the ones that provide a lot of these opportunities?
Well, I did an article in the offseason kind of titled targeting players on good offenses. And basically all I did was take the aggregate ADP of each team. And the Lions were above average. So when you just looked at, where are people drafting Lions, sharp best ball drafters, it was above average of cumulative of other offenses. And when I looked back at, I have done the article for a couple of years now. When I look back at how accurate we were, we hit on 8 of the top 10 teams in terms of offense. It's not really that hard necessarily to hit on the top 10 offenses going into next year. Obviously, there's going to be some teams that surprise, Some teams disappoint, especially due to like injuries, but Jacksonville took a step forward this year. That was kind of in the ADP. The Lions took a step forward this year. That was in the ADP. Now, the big miss obviously was like the Seahawks. Like the market was not on the Seahawks taking a step forward or just being good at all. So, like you said, we're not going to always be right. But for the most part, we are pretty good at projecting, hey, which teams are going to be at least above average in terms of like fantasy scoring.
Bradley, give me your second takeaway.
I want our listeners and viewers to pay close attention to coach decisions and how that influences our running back usage. So Andrew mentioned earlier the Jamaal Williams, DeAndre Swift. It was clear that Jamaal Williams was going to be more of that goal line between the tackles type of running back, and DeAndre Swift was going to handle more of the pass catching downs. Williams had handled some pass catching in the past at Green Bay, but Swift has that profile. He had the dynamism, but also after the injury to Swift, the Lions had been very conservative about using Swift, and so that should have given us pause to how are the Lions going to be using their players in the future as well, not only in Jamaal Williams and DeAndre Swift, but also as an extension. I know this is a running back episode, but also how they handled Jamaal Williams. I think they're going to be more aggressive a little bit next year. Andrew mentioned DeAndre Swift as a potential free agent in the future. They're going to probably give Swift a little bit more, but I also am going to be monitoring how the coaches want to deploy both of these running backs moving forward. I think also paying close attention to how Washington had planned to use Bijan Robinson, them drafting him really highly, and also the coach chatter out of Washington regarding Antonio Gibson, how he was going to be used on special teams a lot, how he had already lost the starting job to Bijan Robinson. Those should have been red flags for us in drafting Antonio Gibson as like a borderline top 24 running back this offseason. But then also on the flip side, James Conner, we had seen what James Conner could do in just the backfield to himself. And with Chase Edmonds gone, that should have been a green flag for us to be saying, Conner can access those top 5, top 7 weekly running back scores. And he was a very respectable running back that even in games where he was injured, you could plug him in. So paying close attention to how the coaches are planning to utilize their running backs is something we need to listen closely to this offseason.
Just since you guys have both mentioned the Lions, I want to ask on Jamaal Williams, who clearly outperformed expectations thanks to all of those touchdowns and the usage from the coaching staff. So, Bradley, just starting with you, around what round do you think you'll be interested in drafting Williams going into next season?
So right now, his way too early ADP is running back 36, which I think is appropriate, like a mid to back end running back 3. I don't know if he's going to get that full type of touchdown regression. He's one of the players I'm going to talk about a little later in the touchdown regression section, but he scored 17 touchdowns this year, and a similar comped player that I thought of was James Conner from 2021, who scored 18, and then this year only scored 8 touchdowns. So I think he will return on like a running back 3 range, but to draft him as a top 24 back, I think is a little exceedingly positive.
Erickson, what do you think about Williams?
Yeah, it's going to be tough because everyone's going to be making the same argument. They go, he can't score as many touchdowns as he did last year. And then he goes out and scores like 12 touchdowns versus 17 touchdowns. And it's like, oh, okay, like that wasn't too bad. So I think that it's a market, cost move. Like that's what you want to do. You need to be so cost sensitive and price sensitive to some of these players here where it's like Jamaal Williams was a value in 2022. Will he be a value in 2023? That depends on his price. At RB36, that sounds like a pretty decent proposition to me, especially because he still has the goal line role. Like, what have we seen from this coaching staff with DeAndre Swift that has shown us that, oh yeah, like they're going to finally like give him all the work? Like they're not. And if people are going to then write home about Swift being like, oh, this is the year he's going to get all the work, Jamaal Williams is going to slide down the draft board. Well, I'm just going to draft Jamaal Williams again. Like whatever. Like I'll just take him in the double-digit rounds, and Swift will be a 3rd, 4th round pick again. Like whatever. I'll just take Williams.
Bradley, give me your 3rd running back takeaway.
My third takeaway is to avoid late ADP veteran pass catching running backs who don't have a strong rush share. And you're thinking, wow, that's a mouthful. But really, there are specific players who fall into this category. The Nyheim Hines of the world, the JD McKissicks of the world, Chase Edmonds, Kenneth Gainwells, those type of running backs who fall outside the top 30, who don't get a lot of rushes. But we've seen a fragile target share for all of those running backs and them just not hitting. One of the counters there could be, well, Jerick McKinnon hit. Well, Jerick McKinnon, joined on to the Kansas City Chiefs and also experienced a Clyde Edwards-Helaire injury for the rest of the season, where he was really not used the first half of the season. So I think that drafting the Hines, McKissicks, Edmonds, Gainwells in the 8th to 12th rounds is just you're giving up too much, for instance, wide receiver equity when you're in your best ball leagues, for instance. It's just too risky. I'd prefer like the Jerick McKinnon type if you get round 15 or later.
Erickson, what's your third running back takeaway?
I just want to add a point on the Jerick McKinnon take. I think that as well. McKinnon, we've seen the Chiefs like turn the backfield over to him like before. So I think that's kind of what makes him a little bit different than like the Hines and McKissick, because whenever there's an injury in that backfield and their role gets elevated, it's still like, okay, they're elevated, but they're still like a number 2 running back, where in the playoffs last year, we saw Jerick McKinnon like have a massive role. We've seen him have a massive role at the second end of this half of the season. He's probably going to have a big role in this playoff run that the Chiefs have. So I think that puts him in a separate territory. And also like when you play on the Chiefs, like just naturally you get a boost. So it's like, okay, like am I going to take JD McKissick on the Washington Commanders because he gets a lot of targets, or Jerick McKinnon because he's on the Chiefs? Like I think it's pretty easy to figure out, okay, there is a little bit of different, but I agree with the point that Bradley made there. So on to my number 3 takeaway. So just going back to like targeting ambiguous backfields, a team that doesn't have a clear-cut starter, that's really where you can find value at the running back position, especially when guys are going so late. People are afraid of, it's going to be a committee. I think this is an opportunity where you can try to draft the most talented running back among, a couple different players. Like take a stance on a player. Like the reason why Rhamondre Stevenson was still relatively cheap, even though people liked him a lot, was because Damian Harris was still there. Like when there's just another body of a running back, it's just going to naturally suppress the player's ADP, where Stevenson would never end up being, a second round pick in drafts heading into the 2022 season. Never was going to happen because Damian Harris was there. So I still think that targeting backfields where there's multiple guys, I think it makes the most sense, because if you hit on the right guy, obviously there's risk involved because you could pick the wrong player. But I think that the benefit of hitting on the right player in a certain situation, I think, is worth the risk, especially when the ADP is already suppressed.
Would you take multiple guys out of an ambiguous backfield to say, well, I'll just hit, it's going to cost me 2 draft picks, but at least I'll probably hit on one of them?
I think it depends on the price. Like, were people drafting Zeke and Tony Pollard at the same time? And I guess that kind of worked out. It really depends on, how the rest of your roster kind of shook up, but that was like really expensive. So if it's expensive, probably not. I think you're probably like limiting your upside more, because yes, every once in a while we do see like 2 running backs from the same backfield like hit consistently every single week, but most of the time it's really only one guy at a time. If there's an injury, obviously you can see it change up a little bit. But I think for the most part, I think I'm going to, make a stance, like have a player take. Like if you think it's going to be this guy that's the better running back, then draft him. And when there are opportunities to hedge, if you're drafting a ton of different teams, then okay, do that, because the guy you drafted got drafted first. Okay, then you can take an opportunity on one of the other players just in case you are wrong, because we all are going to be wrong at different points. As much as we'd like to be right about everything, that won't always be the case. So I think if the price is cheap, then I don't mind taking shots on multiple guys, because there's a chance that both of them could be productive at different times during the season.
Bradley, what's your last running back takeaway?
I think the touchdown regression candidates are going to be either strong targets or strong avoids. And some examples from this past season that panned out that way, like Miles Sanders, he was telling people don't draft him. And come on now, like we're going to draft Miles Sanders. And he was a touchdown regression candidate, 0 touchdowns in 2021, and then has 11 in 2022. His 2023 ADP is running back 23, and I think that's a fair spot for him right now. And also looking at a player who had a lot of touchdowns, I hit on him earlier. James Conner went from 18 down to 8, still finished with I think he finished with 3 of the last 5 games as a top 10 running back, even with Kyler Murray out. So Connor is one of those players that, even though he lost touchdowns, was still a valuable play for you. But this year, a couple players that I'm looking that are on this radar is we mentioned already Jamaal Williams, 17 total touchdowns. Like Andrew mentioned, he could go down to 12 and still be pretty valuable and return on value. But what if he goes down to like 4 or 5? Right? That's a question. He's not going to replicate like that amount of touchdowns. Like breaking Barry Sanders' Lions record is I don't think 2 years in a row is a good bet. But 2 other players who I think are going to be on the upswing next year. Aaron Jones only had 2 rushing touchdowns in this Green Bay Packers offense. And despite, the questions of whether Aaron Rodgers returns or not, I think Aaron Jones is going to be an interesting player of bouncing upward in that touchdown category. Same thing with Alvin Kamara, only 2 rushing touchdowns, despite an increased volume that we've seen from Kamara. Both of their ADPs, Jones and Kamara, are running back 18 and 19 for 2023 right now. And if we're thinking that those players are going to bounce back in the touchdown category, they might be interesting buys, or at least at market cost appropriately.
Yeah, I think my big takeaway is don't go to Miles Sanders for fantasy advice. I won't be doing that next year. Erickson, what's your takeaway here?
Yeah, my last one here is when in doubt, I think that draft guys with proven track records. Like when you look back at Josh Jacobs' career, and he's really kind of the biggest guy because I think that he's a player that the market was pretty wrong on. He was a guy that you could get 6th round, 7th. I mean, he was. I think technically he was like the RB2. I know he didn't do a lot in the playoffs, and he was behind Austin Eckler in most formats. But look, I mean, if you had Josh Jacobs, like you were pretty much in the playoffs, and he was a guy that got you there basically on his own, where you basically drafted him. And I mean, he's never been a bad running back to own in fantasy. Like every year, like he's probably actually outproduced his ADP. If I had to actually look on it, probably except for his second year when he got the most steam after a strong rookie season. But he'd always been on the fringe as an RB1. We saw him at the end of the 2021 season take on a bell cow role. He was catching passes. He set career highs across the board. And then, oh no, like he played in the Hall of Fame game. And people were like, don't want him. He's dead. And I was one of those people. So that was something I got really wrong. And it's just like, you can't let players that have such a proven tracker fall so far where it's like, look, man, if this guy's been an RB1 for most of his career, I'm just going to take him and see how it kind of plays out. And I think a player that kind of comes to mind with that is Antonio Gibson. Like, I know that Brian Robinson obviously there, and that's going to make Gibson cheap. Like, Gibson's going to go behind Brian Robinson in drafts. Like, no doubt in my mind. And Brian Robinson could be really productive. But at the same time, Gibson is definitely more used in the passing game. Gibson could get traded to a different team. And Gibson is good. Like, Gibson is a good football player. So if he's going to be going in the double-digit rounds, like, Antonio Gibson has an RB1 pedigree, sign me up.
Let's go to our hits and misses from 2022 at the running back position. Bradley, let's start with your first hit.
Yeah, my first hit this year was Kenneth Walker. His ADP was running back 34 in this summer, so outside the top 30 of running backs. And I had him projected at running back 22. I thought he would split carries eventually with Rashad Penny. And yeah, it worked out better than we expected because, unfortunately, Penny suffered an injury week 5. But Penny wasn't doing very much through the first 4 weeks. If we look at Penny's games logs, like our vision of Penny was that he crushed in week 4, but the other 3 weeks he fell outside the top 30 of running backs each of those weeks. So Kenneth Walker was only a matter of time before the talent would surface, and we saw Kenneth Walker hit on some running back 1 weeks and running back 2 weeks, and I think he's going to be a really, really solid play. I think a second round pick is I think where he's falling right now in way too early drafts, but you want to be banking on these high pedigree, like early day 2 running backs to outperform their ADPs. I think that's another takeaway and why that was a big hit.
Would you consider him like even as early as in the late first, depending on how you want to build your team, or you're not taking him that early?
I think I'll let him just come to me in the second round. I don't think that there's going to be as much general hype in the first round, given the love for wide receiver that we've seen from some of the ADP and early drafters. So I think Walker will be safely in the second round. That's where I'll be happy taking him.
Erickson, what was your first hit?
Yeah, Saqoun Barkley for me was definitely like my the guy I wanted the most, like of the top tier running backs. It was the reason I felt so comfortable going with a wide receiver in round 1 because I'll just get Saqoun Barkley in round 2 or round 3 where he was going earlier in the offseason. It's because he checked off a lot of the boxes from the rules I kind of listed out and talked about. He was an impending free agent. He had a pedigree of production. He's been a guy that's finished as the number 1 running back before in fantasy. And when you do that, when you show that skill set, like that doesn't go away. The only reason it went away for Saqoun Barkley was because he never had an offensive line that was good, and the Giants made improvements to the offensive line this season, and he was hurt all the time. And what do you know? He entered the season and he wasn't injured. I remember specifically ranking Barkley like very early on after last season ended, and he was like, he was outside the top 15 running backs. I'm like, okay, well, he's like coming back from an injury again. It's like, wait, no, he's not. Like, he's actually healthy right now. And I had to totally shift my mind about projecting because every year it seemed like he was rehabbing entering the season. Oh, it's going to be a slow start for Saqoun again. Like, the offensive line's horrible. And he was a guy that benefited a lot from positive touchdown regression. So last year in 2021, he had 13 red zone touches overall. That's it. Last year, or this last season, he had 23 carries inside the 10-yard line. He scored 10 rushing touchdowns. Just because the offense got so much better, it benefited the guy that sees the most action around the red zone, and that was Saqoun Barkley. So a player that I kind of look at who could potentially be this version of Saqoun Barkley is Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor was so bad this year because offensive situation was horrible, didn't get red zone looks, and he got hurt. Those are the 3 things that suppressed Saqoun Barkley's ADP and are going to do the exact same thing to Jonathan Taylor because, as noted by FantasyPros Instagram, Jonathan Taylor was the biggest bust of the fantasy season, which I disagree with because he got hurt. I that's the way I view it. I mean, I feel like you can't really label players bust if they get injured. It's football. People get hurt. And there were stretches of games where Jonathan Taylor was super productive, especially his last 4 games before he ultimately got injured for the rest of the season. So, I think that Barkley was my big hit, and I'm trying to follow the process with him with a guy like Jonathan Taylor.
To be clear, the fans voted on that. We didn't say, "Oh, we're deciding Jonathan Taylor was the biggest bust."
The fans are wrong. I'm just saying the fans are wrong. He was not the biggest bust.
I still want you giving. As a social media guy, I did the Instagram, and Ethan, of course, built the graphics. But Bradley, what's your next hit?
Yeah, my hit was actually a fade, and that was fading Najee Harris pretty hard. The ADP last summer was Najee Harris running back 6. Borderline first round running back, early second round. And I had Harris as my running back 16 in projected points. And I just couldn't get behind drafting. I had 0 Najee Harris anywhere. And I was concerned about the change at quarterback going from Big Ben to, is it good? We knew what we had, Mitchell Trubisky. It was a back end quarterback too, or maybe it's Kenny Pickett, who didn't really stand out to me as a quarterback prospect. And then you have a regression of touchdowns. The offense is just not going to operate as well. Najee Harris benefited from a massive volume. We listened to the coaches as well saying we want to get other running backs involved this offseason. And we didn't know who exactly it was. It emerged that Jaylen Warren became more of that 30% snap share type of running back and really effective. But Najee Harris, he did get volume, but for him to not hit that top 10, that feels pretty good to not have a lot of Najee Harris throughout the season when he was being drafted that high.
Where do you think he should go in drafts in 2023?
I think that's running back 13 to 15. I think that's probably going to be where he's landing. I don't think the Steelers are going to move away from him as a volume play. But I also, and that's going to be the argument for Harris. He's going to be a volume type of running back, but he hasn't shown a lot of dynamism. The offensive line still isn't great in Pittsburgh. They still have quarterback questions. The offense is still not operating at a even average NFL level. So my concerns are that Najee Harris just can't access the high-end running back ones or even running back 5 weeks that you want on a pretty regular basis. So a volume running back too.
Erickson, what's your last hit?
Rhamondre Stevenson. I mentioned him a couple times already here, but just pounding my chest for Rhamondre Stevenson through draft season. I remember someone came up to me in a diner and was like, "I love the show, Andrew. I'm going to draft Rhamondre Stevenson in my draft." And it was like, that's all I needed. That's all I needed to hear. So I was excited about Stevenson basically delivering all year long, even in the fantasy playoffs when he had that ankle injury. He still came through against the Raiders. So, look, the thing with Rhamondre that stuck out to me the most, and obviously he hit bigger because of the Damian Harris injury. You can't always project that to happen. But at the same time, even when Harris was healthy, Stevenson was the better guy. Like, he was the player that they were using more of. And it's this, again, betting on the more talented running back between two players in an ambiguous backfield. No one wants to draft Patriots running backs. Well, they never had a guy like Rhamondre Stevenson that showed elite talent as a rookie. All the things that he did as a rookie, like he was in the doghouse as a rookie. He got out of the Bill Belichick doghouse. That is such a hard feat to accomplish by a day 3 pick. And Stevenson did that. And one of the things that pointed out to me, just to kind of put a metric on Stevenson, was he was PFF's highest graded rookie running back in 2021. And I looked at all of the highest graded rookie running backs basically over the last couple of years. And the players, so Stevenson was one of those guys, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara. All the next season is second-year guys, top 8 fantasy running backs. Now, technically, Stevenson didn't hit top 8. He was 10th in PPR, so come on, Stevenson. He was close. But if you guys are interested, I want to pose a question to you two. Who was the top-rated rookie running back from this year's class? And why will he be a top 8 running back next year?
Bradley,
Ryan,
you know? Go first. Oh, you know this one?
I know this one, yeah.
Is it Walker?
No, it's not Walker.
It's Tyler Algier.
Yeah, it's Tyler Algier. So, yeah, I'm going to draft a lot of Tyler Algier because he's going to be a top 10 running back next year. So,
but Algier is sort of the example. I think a lot of people use like comparing him to Michael Carter, where you could see the Falcons.
No, that's Dameon Pierce, Ryan. That is Dameon Pierce.
Okay.
That's Dameon Pierce.
But Algier, too, is in the same scenario where it could happen, right?
I mean, anything is possible, but he was better than those types of... I mean, he was way better than Michael Carter was. And Michael Carter was a committee back in college.
Yeah, that's true.
Tyler Algier was not. So,
right, I also think that to put a bow on it, Cordero Patterson, I think, is going to stick around in Atlanta. There's a cap hit of almost $4 million for Patterson, and so I think it's going to be primarily Algier and then Patterson.
Let's go to the misses. Bradley, what was your first one?
Chase Edmonds. Ouch. Oh, man. Where's the Kleenex? I need to get it out because that one hurts the soul. Like the Miami Dolphins most aggressively targeted Chase Edmonds in free agency and paid him a lot of money. And we had seen some spike weeks from Chase Edmonds when he was with the Arizona Cardinals. He also profiled as a pass catching running back. And with the excitement surrounding a new head coach and Tyreek Hill and a revitalization of Tua Tagovailoa, like Chase Edmonds could have been the back, and then he wasn't. And it was simply that Raheem Mostert, and I was looking at this, I was trying to like justify to myself, why did Raheem Mostert do better? It was because of the pass blocking. Like Raheem Mostert out pass blocked or was a better pass block graded running back than Chase Edmonds during the first 4 or 5 weeks, and especially during that Cincinnati game where it was Tua getting that concussion. Chase Edmonds really got in the doghouse and never was able to get out of it. He was my running back 25. He was running back 33 in ADP, and it hurts because I wanted him to hit so badly, and I got into so many Twitter arguments about it, and yeah, sorry guys.
Erickson, what was your first miss?
Well, I want to follow with Bradley here about Chase Edmonds, and so the process behind Edmonds. Like, do you think that you were because there are times where you kind of run the right process. Like, they obviously paid him a lot of money, so there was a reason why it was enticing to go after Edmonds. But what would be like, hey, if I could go back in hindsight, like, what did I miss? Like, was Edmonds just not that good? Like, was this just an overrated player? Like, from the start, he's always been overrated. Like, if you could go back and like make a change, like, what would you tell Bradley about drafting Chase Edmonds, a year ago?
I think I would have just kept him at ADP with these changing of running backs. They also did sign Raheem Mostert as well, and he was a system guy. And so I think that I would have drafted a little bit more Raheem Mostert and just leveled that out. Like, maybe not be as aggressive with those running backs changing teams when we don't know if he fits the scheme or not.
Yeah, like changing teams, changing coaches, because even the Dolphins signed Cedric Wilson to like a fat contract, and then they're like, yeah, we're never going to use this guy.
And then we traded for Tyreek Hill, right?
It's like, okay, cool. Like, that sounds great. But so I'll go to my running back that I was wrong on. So that's Josh Jacobs. I've alluded to it multiple times already here because I just think it's so obvious that not only me, but like the market just totally blew off Josh Jacobs as someone that you didn't want to have. And it's weird because I had the idea in my mind that Josh Jacobs really could be a ADP value. Like, I remember writing about him and talking about Josh McDaniels specifically, and how Josh McDaniels had basically ridden guys into the ground before with the Patriots, whether it was Dion Lewis contract year, LeGarrette Blount contract year, Shane Vereen contract year. Like, all those guys had season highs across the board in terms of their rushing production, receiving production as impending free agents. And honestly, I felt peer pressure from other industry because he was like the poster boy for bust. Like, Josh Jacobs, like, bust. He played in the Hall of Fame game. You're a donkey if you draft Josh Jacobs, basically was like the sentiment. And I honestly felt that. And that's what maybe I was almost like afraid to like go to bat for Josh Jacobs when you just look at the peripheral metrics for him. And it was like, dude, like, he's already been an RB1 for like 4 of his years in the NFL. He showed last year he could be involved in the passing game. And we've seen this with Josh McDaniels before. So for me, it's like, if you identify something that, yes, it may be different from what the market is saying, but if you have facts to back it up, like, go forward with that. And what's the worst cost if Josh Jacobs doesn't hit? Okay, well, he was a late round pick anyway. So I really think that trying to assess if you're really just, it's okay to go against the market in certain places. And that's really where you get the most value. So Josh Jacobs hitting, and I remember even pointing out that when they signed Devontae Adams, I was like, oh, like, this is a boost for Josh Jacobs. Like, we're going to see this offense move the ball more efficiently. We're going to see more red zone opportunities. And that's exactly what we saw. I will say, too, with Josh Jacobs as well, that he definitely got a major boost because Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow were not, like, available at all during the season. So he does not have this season if those guys are healthy. I do think that is something to point out, and that makes a lot of tough decisions with some of these running back takeaways, because if guys get hurt, like, you're going to naturally just see receivers see a larger role, running backs see a larger role in the receiving game. But overall, Josh Jacobs, yeah, I think it's just proven track record. You just can't let these guys fall too far. And whoever the market dictates as like the next year's Josh Jacobs, as whether it's Dalvin, Joe Mixon, like one of these older running backs that people just don't want, that's the guy I want, whoever the cheapest one of those veteran guys is.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Josh Jacobs was my least rostered player, like, in the entire NFL across all of my leagues. I had him nowhere, and of course that, came back to bite me. But I think the point about, like, not just other running backs getting hurt, but receivers getting hurt as well. Every fantasy season is so, changed and shaped by where the injuries happen and what opportunities that creates. So that sort of goes back to your point about, like, just betting on talent and saying, this is a guy who, if injuries do happen that put them in an opportunity to shine, they have the talent to do so. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. Bradley, what's your next miss?
Yeah, big miss on Tony Pollard this year. His ADP was running back 27, and he was my running back 31. I thought it was going to be same old, that ultimately Zeke was going to hold his role, his 60 to 65% snaps, and he would get his 14 to 17 carries a game and would get the touchdowns. And it was true about the touchdowns, and it was true about the carries. But Pollard got more rushes, and the Dallas Cowboys actually increased their rush rate. I think they were the fifth most rush attempts per game among all NFL teams. And so they were just willing to let Tony Pollard touch the ball more. I think it was a factor in that there was no other wide receiver really outside of CD Lamb that was getting play, but instead of throwing the ball, they were just going to hand it off to Tony Pollard and sprinkle in some Zeke as well as a 50-50 split. So I think this has been a pivot point for me on Tony Pollard, betting on the talent. Like, what's to lose if you draft a type of player like Tony Pollard outside the top 24? I think that's one of my takeaways as well, and learning moment from this miss.
Do you have a team that you'd most like to see Pollard on next season?
Still the Dallas Cowboys.
Still the Cowboys. Erickson, do you want to see him somewhere else or still in Dallas?
I mean, I don't think he's ever really going to get a super featured role, honestly. And I'm actually almost afraid that a team like overpays for him as like, oh, he's going to be our featured back. And oh my God, imagine if he goes to like a Shanahan scheme, goes to Miami Dolphins. Oh my God, Brad's going to go all back in again on the Chase Edmonds Dolphins with Tony Pollard. But yeah, Tony Pollard for me too was a miss. And it was weird because I did not want anything to do with Zeke, like whatsoever. So naturally, I should have just been higher on the running back that would benefit the most from Zeke failing. And I just never put 2 and 2 together. So that's like another takeaway, a mini takeaway I have, is that if you're going to fade or strongly fade a running back in a backfield, you should probably just be higher on the other running back, especially if you're not fading the backfield because the offense is just a bad situation. If it's a good offense, Dallas was going to be a good offense. So I should have been higher on Tony Pollard because I was fading Zeke.
And what was your last miss?
I mean, even though he was a league winner, technically Cam Akers. Cam Akers is technically a miss because chances are you had him, you probably didn't make it to your playoffs, which is the big issue here. And it's really hard to parse like what went wrong with Cam Akers because from the get-go, it was like, oh my God, like what is happening? Week 1, Thursday night, he comes out. Oh, he doesn't come out, I should say. Darrell Henderson comes out with the starters, and people are already sliding to my DMs and being like, Erickson, what happened to Cam Akers? I'm like, guys, I have literally no idea what he did to piss off the coaches. I think it came back to actually the pass blocking was a big issue with him, and they preferred Darrell Henderson in the pass blocking game. So again, pay attention to the guys that can pass block. Turn on the film. Watch these guys pass protection. But Cam Akers, getting benched in week 1. And I think just the overarching takeaway with Cam Akers was I was really just so fixated on his role. I was like citing Cam Akers, the splits in the playoffs. Like when he's healthy, like Sean McVay would just absolutely feed this guy no matter what. And I knew that there was not necessarily his efficiency wasn't great, whether it was because of the injury, whether because he just isn't that, dynamic of a running back. I think he's a fine running back. I don't think that he's an uber special talent, but I don't think he's like the worst running back in the world. But it was really like Rams. And what do you know? The Rams sucked this year on offense. So just being so gun-ho about Cam Akers, I was just probably being too aggressive and just too fixated on the situation because that's ultimately where you're going to get burned more than not. When you think you know a situation down to the T and you're just totally wrong about it, then that's a situation where you're not going to hit on a certain player. Now, I am encouraged that how he finished the season, and I'm encouraged that Sean McVay is coming back. So if Cam Akers, if people are going to write him off after how bad he started the season and not really realize how good he was to end the year, I'm going to be backing on Cam Akers because he did look good to end the year, and he is healthier now, and Sean McVay is coming back. So, yes, the Rams' offense is not super exciting right now because they have a patchwork offensive line, but they get Cooper Kupp back. They get Stafford back. Like, it will be better than it was in 2022. So I'll be in on Cam Akers, especially if he's going round 6, round 7. Smells like a Josh Jacobs type of player with, him also being a free agent too.
Let's go to our 2023 bold predictions at running back. We'll go a little quicker through these. Bradley, I'll start with your first one.
Yeah, maybe this is too hard of a pivot for me, but Tony Pollard finishes as the running back 1 overall. Oh, there we go. That's why I understand.
Is that on Dallas?
That's on Dallas. That's assuming he's on Dallas. Pollard was already the running back 8 in fantasy points per game. He already has over 1,000 rushing yards and 370 receiving yards. He finished with 4 top 6 running back weeks with Ezekiel Elliott in the lineup. Now, we expect Ezekiel Elliott to decline. He's decreased his fantasy points per game year over year since 2018. And that's even with Zeke scoring 12 touchdowns for the second year in a row in 3 of the last 4 years. Pollard, his efficiency stats are there. He's Alvin Kamara type. Second among running backs in yards per reception, 4th in yards per route run, 5th in yards per touch, 4th in breakaway run rate, 3rd in breakaway runs on only 51% of the snaps. And Pollard did all of that with the 8th most defenders in the box and 10th highest stacked front carry rate among running backs. He was doing it even though teams knew they were going to run. So give me Tony Pollard if he's on the Cowboys as running back 1 overall.
Assuming he's on the Cowboys, no explanation, just gut reaction. You are drafting him in round what?
Back in round 1, early round 2.
Okay. Erickson, what's your first bold prediction here?
Nick Chubb, number 1 overall running back, because there's no way people are going to draft him there, even though he's probably the best running back in the NFL, as he is every single year. Mr. 5 yards per carry himself. Look, the Deshaun Watson experiment did not come to fruition like we all thought it would. Like, the splits between Chubb, like before Watson gets there, he's like a top 3 running back, and then he's like RB24 with Deshaun Watson. Like, that's not going to carry over year from year. But I hope the taste of Nick Chubb not doing great during the fantasy playoffs does. And I hope people just let him fall to round 2, round 3 again. And I'll say this about Nick Chubb. He's never going to be the wrong draft pick. Like, wherever he ends up going, like, because he always is super productive. And Kareem Hunt's gone. Like, see ya. So unless we expect Dearness Johnson, Jerome Ford to take on a significant role as a receiver in this team, Nick Chubb, don't forget week 18, 6 targets. That was the second time in his career he saw 6 targets. So there is a path where his receiving increases, the offensive efficiency increases with Sean Watson. He scores even more touchdowns than he did last year. And to just tie a bow on it, he's also already the best running back in the NFL. So Nick Chubb, for me, I think he has a chance to be the number one overall running back, especially in half point versus PPR.
Yeah, you don't think we've seen enough out of his career to know that they're just not going to use him as a pass catcher, though? Because you're not going to be the number one overall running back if you don't catch passes, and he just hasn't done that.
When was the last time we saw him without Kareem Hunt? Kareem Hunt's not there. Like, he's gone. I think that matters significantly. And maybe, Ryan, if you don't think it matters, then I hope the market doesn't either.
All right, let's go to Bradley's second bold prediction here.
Oh man, I gotta get out my Shrek belch to get away the forks and pitchforks that are gonna come for me from the people who claim he hasn't taken a snap in the NFL yet. The mob is gonna come get me. But here's my bold take: Bijan Robinson finishes as a top 5 running back in fantasy points per game. He's the consensus top running back in the class. And let's look historically at top rookie running back picks. Breece Hall was the running back 7 in points per game before his ACL injury. Najee Harris was running back 6 in the previous year. Jonathan Taylor, running back 10. Jacobs was running back 14 his rookie year, and Saqoun Barkley running back 2. So it is within that range of outcomes that Bijan Robinson can do it. He has the highest PFF rush grade among all college running backs at 96. Most avoided tackles among all college running backs. He was 8th among running backs in receiving yards, despite being 70th in receptions. He's just so good in the open field. And last year, Breece Hall, the top drafted rookie running back, was ADP running back 18. Bijan should be a borderline first round pick, and he might fall to like the back end of the second, third, or heck, even fourth round. We will see where the hype goes, but you want to be aggressive on the best running back in the class.
Is he somebody like who would you most comp him to if you had to put a name to it?
I mean, between Taylor and Barkley, I think that's where he's going to fall. I think that's going to be the right comp. If Breece Hall, Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, somewhere in that range-ish. I don't think.
Is there a team you most want to see him go to?
Anywhere. Like anywhere, he's going to probably be the best back. Really like some of the expiring older running backs he could quickly take over for. And, I don't think that those teams would aggressively attack the running back position with that type of asset anyways. So yeah, anywhere, like doesn't matter landing spot. We were worried about, is Breece Hall going to be affected by Michael Carter? Is Kenneth Walker going to be affected by Rashad Penny? No, come on. Like the team who drafts Bijan Robinson they're going to use him and use him heavily, especially in that first contract. That's how teams are planning to use the running backs and have been using the running backs the last few years. So wherever he lands, doesn't matter.
Texans, let's go.
Let's go.
Erickson, what's your next bold prediction?
Mentioned it earlier, but Tyler Allegeir, I think he's going to finish as a top 15 running back. And I think that people are just going to be afraid. People are going to be afraid because they're going to draft somebody, even though they have Cordell Patterson at the prime age of 33 years old. Is still under contract. Like, he's going to act as the firewall, like protecting Tyler Allegeir because they have Cordell Patterson. That's going to prevent them to wanting to draft another running back highly. Remember, Caleb Huntley, they were fine trotting this guy out as well. So they have a lot of running backs on their team that they like, that they think are good. So I just don't think that they're going to invest any high-end draft capital potentially. I mean, Allegeir himself was a day 3 pick, and he rushed for over 1,000 yards. So, I don't think it's that complicated. So I think Allegeir, especially how effective he was, especially down the stretch, basically being the number one running back while Patterson was still healthy, I think Allegeir is going to be a smash in 2023 drafts.
You have him, you said finishes top 15. Can you just get it to top 12? Can you call him an RB1 and be really bold here?
Fine. Top 12 running back. There you go. Happy, Ryan.
I love the conviction in your bold predictions. Let's go to Bradley's next one.
Okay, this is going to be probably another hot one. all four of these running backs are going to fall outside the top 20 in fantasy points per game. That's Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and Joe Mixon all fall out. And it's mostly because of where they are in the age apex. And all of them have shown either signs of slowing down or, well, we'll talk about Henry. He's going to turn 30 during the season. He plays the running back position. He's got 5 screws in his foot already. He was fortunate to stay healthy in 2022. There's a new offensive coordinator, maybe a new quarterback, could be a new offensive identity for the Titans going into 2023. He's running back 8 in the ADP, way too early drafts. I think that, fine if you want to take him there, but it's just too risky for me. For a 30-year-old running back. Dalvin Cook, we've seen his efficiency decline. He's a $14 million cap hit, but only 6 dead cap. He's a sneaky cut candidate, surprise. And then he was number 1 running back in stuffed runs, 42nd in yards created per touch, 4.1 true yards per carry. In Minnesota, they went from 14th to 28th in team run plays per game under Kevin O'Connell. So the rushing volume simply wasn't there as a team. And then Kamara as well, hiding that inefficiency. So he got a ton of rush and ton of targets, but he was had the 13th most stuffed runs, and his 4.0 true yards per carry was 46th, his RB 48 in breakaway run rate. He finished as running back 20 or worse in 9 of his 15 games. And look, he's not going anywhere in 2023, but we are also worried about the pending legal situation involving Alvin Kamara. I don't think that's been resolved. And then Joe Mixon is turning 27. He has a dead cap hit of $5.5 million, but he has a salary. He's expected to be paid $12.8 million this year. He has 80 fewer carries in 2022 than he had last season in 1 fewer game, 61st in true yards per carry. He did improve as a pass catcher, but the juke rate was really bad. The breakaway run rate and yards per touch was really bad. The Bengals are a sneaky play to be in the running back market this year. So it was just terrible all around in those efficiency stats. And I think all 4 of those on the wrong side of the age apex, money, contract, all of the things surrounding them, there are paths to failure for all of them falling outside the running back 20.
This is a great bold prediction. Which of the 4, though, if you had to pick just one, are you most confident will fall out?
Alvin Kamara. I think because of the pending legal situation, I think that's the concern, is that he didn't pay any suspension during the 2022. And then based on what I've still been reading, reading in the fantasy Twitter stratosphere, the fantasy lawyers are still saying that regardless of what happens, he's probably going to still serve a suspension. So there we go.
Erickson, what's your next bold prediction?
I do love that bold call by Bradley. I think that fading these deteriorating older running backs is definitely going to want to be the move. And just if one of them falls till the round 8, then sure, that's why I'll draft them. But until they fall significantly in ADP, hands off, because I'd rather draft someone named Rhamondre Stevenson, who I think is going to be a top 5 running back. Damian Harris is a free agent, so he's gone. He has not been reliable. Even if he doesn't, he didn't have a great year this year, so people are still interested. He wants to be back with the Patriots, but they drafted Kevin Harris. They drafted Pierre Strong. Clearly they're ready to move on. And when Stevenson was the guy, he was everything you could ask for in a fantasy running back. And going back to the point, and it's kind of I'm making my own takeaways on the show. I'm realizing things as we talk about this, but the running backs that are thriving in the receiving game, look at the other receivers in their offenses. It's not a coincidence Rhamondre Stevenson had this massive receiving role because Jacoby freaking Myers is the wide receiver one of the Patriots. Austin Eckler. Why do you think he caught so many passes here? Because Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both never were healthy at the same time ever in any games this year. And Travis Etienne. People point to, Etienne, he doesn't catch any passes. Well, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk all stayed healthy. The Jaguars had the least injured team this past season. That doesn't tend to carry over year. So consider me in on Etienne. Back to Rhamondre. But I think that Stevenson, he has the receiving role. He's explosive. And I think they're going to feed him. He's the best player on their offense. And people will be out on the Patriots offense because of how badly it sucked this year. Matt Patricia's gone. literally they can add anybody and the offense is going to be significantly better. So whether it's Cliff Kingsbury, whether it's Bill O'Brien, it's going to be improved, and Stevenson is going to be the focal point of it, and I want all of it.
Last predictions here. Bradley, what's yours?
James Cook is a league winner by the end of 2023. Cook has those Tony Pollard efficiency metrics. He was second in true yards per carry, third in yards per touch, first in breakaway run rate. He made the most of his carries against light fronts, sure, but that's what you're going to see with the Buffalo Bills offense. Like, teams have to defend against Josh Allen, both throwing and passing. They have to defend against Stephon Diggs. And y'all can have your opinions about Gabriel Davis one way or the other, but he stretches the field at least. So from week 13 on, James Cook played 40% or more of the snaps in 4 or 5 games. He finishes the running back 28 during that span. He's ADP 31 in 2 early drafts. And Devin Singletary is an unrestricted free agent. Even if they bring in a first and second down grinder like Tony Pollard type, running back 2+ is the pathway to success for James Cook in 2023.
Yeah, I love this call. I liked Cook going into this year, and it didn't happen, but I think we've seen every reason to think it can and hopefully will happen in 2023. Erickson, what's your last bold prediction?
Kareem Hunt is an RB1 on a new team. We're talking about, obviously, correlating this a little with my Nick Chubb call, him finishing number 1 overall. Look, I don't know what the Browns were doing this year with Kareem Hunt. Like, he comes out the gates week 1, has like a monster game. Like, all right, here we go. Like, Kareem Hunt's going to be a top 15 running back again because he's super efficient. And they just didn't use him all year long. I remember writing the usage report about the Browns, and every single week it was like, Hunt, 5 touches, 6 touches. Like, I don't understand like why they went away from this guy. If they wanted to trade him, then I don't know why they didn't trade him, because that's what it seemed like leading up to the trade deadline. Okay, like they're monitoring his touches. They don't want him to get hurt. They want to move on from him, get some draft picks for Deshaun Watson, etc. But they just didn't. So I don't know if they tried to trade him. They just couldn't find a partner. But he's gone from Cleveland. And look, this guy has led the NFL in rushing before. And he's coming off a season where he didn't have a lot of wear and tear. He doesn't have a lot of wear and tear overall. He's still only 27 years old. Proven track record. Like, that's something you need to think about here. He's a proven stud in the NFL, and he could sign with a brand new team. I mean, obviously I want him to go to the Chiefs, but he's not going back there. He could sign with a brand new team, be their RB1. What if he goes to Miami? Kareem Hunt in that Miami Dolphins offense, reunite with Tyreek Hill, Buffalo. Like, there's a lot of places where Kareem Hunt, we're looking when the cards flip over after free agency, we're like, oh my God, like Kareem Hunt is an RB1. So I want to be in on him now early on because I think he's kind of forgotten about because of how little he was using the Browns offense after so many years of him seeing a pretty solid role, even alongside Nick Chubb.
I think he will be 28 when the season starts. So that doesn't concern you, though, because of the lack of wear and tear, relatively speaking.
I mean, he's not 30. He's not Derrick Henry age, so he should be okay.
All right, let's open up the mailbag here to end the show. It's a good time to remind the listeners that if they want even more access to our analysts, they can be sure to join us on Discord at fantasypros.com/chat. A premium subscription will get listeners full access to our analysts through AMAs, stages, and more. And yes, we will be on there all off season long. So definitely be sure to check it out and interact with Erickson and D-Bro and the entire crew on there. A couple questions here. First question, which rookie running back will be the most consistent next year? That was the question we got on Twitter. I'm going to rule out Bijan because that's the obvious answer. So besides Bijan, which rookie running back will be the most consistent next year? Starting with you, Bradley.
There's been a lot of love for Jahmyr Gibbs. I've seen, but there are also, let me pull up since it's the mailbag, it should buy me some time to get the research out. Andrew, you can stall for me as well. But
look, so I'm still very early on in my rookie prospect analysis, but I know a couple of names that have stuck out to me, especially which one of my favorite names overall, the kid from Auburn, Tank Bigsby. Like, that dude, I mean, his name is Tank. Like, come on. Like, so I have, again, like I said, I haven't done all my research yet. Obviously, Bijan is the creme de la creme of these rookie running backs, but there is more talented guys. So I would say him, and the other guy that stands out to me is A-Chain from Texas A&M. The dude can just flat out fly. Like, and the fact that he, forced a committee alongside Isaiah Spiller, I think is good. Isaiah Spiller obviously got drafted. No, we didn't see a lot from him, obviously, as a rookie, but the NFL was like so high. I remember like when I did mock drafts with Spiller, like he was like Jeremiah's number one running back. Like, the NFL was obsessed with him. So I think that bodes well for A-Chain to have high draft capital, which obviously helps him get, more playing time sooner. So I think A-Chain, especially with his explosive skill set of how fast he is, he's another guy that I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into.
Bradley? One other running back, Israel Abanaconda out of Pittsburgh. 241 rush attempts, had a 90.6 PFF rush grade. Someone that I'm hoping he can get day 2 draft capital just so that we can see him translate into the NFL.
I'll throw in a second question here. Which of the free agent running backs do you see making the biggest impact on their new teams or current team if they happen to be re-signed? Erickson?
Well, it's Kareem Hunt for me. I think that he's going to be an RB1 on a new team because I think that he's probably the most talented guy hitting free agency, and I think that he's probably the most likely to not be retained by his own team. Like Jacobs, could go back to the Raiders. I think Damian Harris is probably going to be a Raider. Honestly, I think that the connection with McDaniels is there with him. He could be a goal line back. I think that's going to hurt Jacobs if they bring back both guys. But I would say still with Kareem Hunt, and I think I know who Bradley's going to say here.
Well, Saqoun Barkley, I don't know if the Giants are going to bring back. They might tag him, but there's also just today, Ian Rappaport was coming out, the Giants are going to try to re-sign. But whether it's him or, I wonder how much love Samaje Perine has gotten. He might be an interesting later unwritten free agent. He really improved in his pass blocking. He was just about as good in the PFF rush grade as Joe Mixon and played almost as well as Mixon in a lot of other metrics. So I wonder if a team, even though he's 27 years old, is willing to take a shot on him. And then another veteran, Donta Foreman out of Carolina, both players who have been at least interesting eyebrow-raising running backs, veterans who will contribute pretty significantly.
That's going to do it for us. Don't forget to check out the prop bet cheat sheet at bettingpros.com. Thank you so much to Bradley for joining us today. A lot of great information there. Really appreciate you coming on. Thanks to Erickson as well. And thank you to the fans for listening. Like I said, we're not going anywhere this offseason. Obviously, there'll be fewer episodes, but definitely stay subscribed. Follow us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. For Erickson and Bradley, I'm Ryan Wormeli. We'll see you guys again soon.